Jason Johnson is a professor of political science at Morgan State University. Anna Palmer is senior Washington correspondent with Politico. Big thanks to both of you. Jason, let me start with you. President Trump, again, at some point we expect that he will weigh in on all of this. What does the president need to do here?
Well, he doesn't really need to do anything. Look, the more that Donald Trump decides to involve himself in the situation, the more he nationalizes the race. The fact of the matter is, Roy Moore is probably a pedophile. The fact of the matter is, Roy Moore was, trolling for dates at custody hearings when he was a lawyer. And the voters in Alabama are going to have to make a decision one way or another. We already saw that President Trump doesn't necessarily have that much sway in Alabama. He couldn't get Luther Strange elected. So regardless of what he says, this is going to play out at the local level. What's actually more important is what Republicans in the Senate are saying, and they've made it very clear that they don't welcome Roy Moore, but there may be more to that story as we go forward.
Well, here's the thing. We also heard during the last hour or so, Senator Collins indicated that based on her understanding of the rules, Jason, if he is elected in Alabama, the Senate is obligated to seat him.
Yeah, look, here's the thing, Craig, and I've thought this is very clear all along. The Republicans in the Senate, they don't dislike Roy Moore just because he may actually have these allegations. The reason they don't want him is because they don't want a religious version of Ted Cruz. Okay, Roy Moore is the kind of person who would be disruptive to policy, who wouldn't want to pass anything, and would make their jobs difficult. If they thought they could work with him, they wouldn't have a problem. Remember, you have Greg Gianforte, who literally beat up a reporter, and he was welcomed with open arms in the House. The House and the Senate Republicans aren't all that different. So really, a lot of this is just about power dynamics in Washington, D.C. This is not some huge moral stand by Mitch McConnell.
And I want to show everyone the latest polling on the race here. And if you take a look at these polls, and we've assembled a number of them, Moore appears to still be ahead. But if you look at the lead that he had before the allegations versus now, it is clear, according to these polls at least, that the allegations have had an effect. We should caution that some of these polls are robo-polls. It can be difficult to get good polling that matches NBC standards. But wouldn't these polls, this collection of polls, explain precisely why Roy Moore is still in this race?
Well, I think Roy Moore is still in the race because he thinks he can win, and I think a lot of Republicans here in Washington are very concerned that he's going to win. So I think he's obviously not admitted any wrongdoing so far. They're pushing back, they're sending letters, they're threatening legal action. That's everything that you would expect them to do. The big question is, what does President Donald Trump do? You've already seen some of his allies, Steve Bannon and others, start to potentially walk away from the Moore candidacy. But I think there's a big discussion going on about what is the future of this race, and then what do they do if they have the conundrum of him winning?
Steve Bannon, the big supporter, and as you know, of Roy Moore. However, articles in The Atlantic, The Daily Beast now, both quoting sources near Bannon who say that the former White House chief strategist may be having some second thoughts. What do these allegations mean for Bannon's, quote, season of war against the establishment?
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be surprised. I mean, obviously, Sean Hannity also came out last night saying he was giving Roy Moore 24 hours to defend himself more clearly and articulate his case on this fact. I think the issue for Steve Bannon is twofold. One, he's trying to convince Republican mega donors to get behind him and to challenge some of these incumbents in the Senate in terms of the 2018 election. That's a big ask. And when you're backing somebody like Roy Moore and these kinds of allegations are not the thing that any Republican wants to be talking about, that's, I think, why you're having part of this reevaluation phase by Steve Bannon. He hasn't come out publicly and said that, but there's certainly a lot of swirl around folks who are close to him where there's concern that it's not about, Mitch McConnell here. It's about, will they be able to get the funding and the backing that they want for some of these other candidates that they want to back?
Jason, you may have missed this, but Moore's attorney was on our air a short time ago defending the judge in again, what can only be described as a bizarre interview. It happened about 2 hours ago. Take a listen.
Why would he need permission from any of these girls' mothers if they weren't underage?
Sure, that's a good question. And culturally speaking, I would say there's differences. I looked up Allie's background there. Wow, that's awesome that you have got such a diverse background. It's really cool to read through that. But point is this:
what does Allie's background have to do with dating a 14-year-old?
I'm not finished with the context of it.
Well, please answer.
What
does Ali Velshi's background have to do with dating under children, 14-year-old girls?
Sure. In other countries, there's arrangement through parents for what we would refer to as consensual marriage. So
Ali's from Canada.
I understand that. And Ali's also spent time in other countries, of which I've gone to. So it's not a bad thing.
I don't know where you're going with this, Trent.
It was hard to figure out precisely where he was going with it. And again, to be clear, Ali is from Canada and has not dated underage girls. Jason, what was the point there? What was the attempt at a defense?
Oh, it wasn't a defense. You just have a bigoted lawyer working for Roy Moore who's also a bigot and a homophobe himself. I mean, basically he was trying to suggest, hey, you're a brown person. You must be from one of those Middle Eastern countries where they do that, which would be the same as me saying, hey, Craig, you're from South Carolina, so you like dogfighting or something. This is the kind of racist demagoguery that has become the standard in the Republican Party, certainly in Alabama and certainly through the context of this race. And that's one of the real problems here. Look, at the end of the day, if we believe in how democracy is supposed to work, Roy Moore may actually be reflective of the kind of people who are in Alabama. They may actually want someone who spends his time chasing after underage girls and passing laws that discriminate against people of color, that discriminate against gay people, that deny people their rights. They may want that. But whether or not that is good for the overall democracy of this country, or whether or not that is good for Republicans in general, is really the question. I don't think Donald Trump is qualified to answer or deal with those issues. I don't think Republicans really want to handle it. I think if Mitch McConnell had his dream come true, Jeff Sessions would put himself as a write-in candidate, go back down to Alabama, move away from being the Attorney General. Trump would put somebody in, they'd shut down the Russia investigation. That's what the Republicans would really like. They don't want to have this conversation next summer during midterms.
Anna, if the Democrats can't win this race in Alabama, again, it should be noted here right now, they are outspending Roy Moore. They are blanketing the airwaves. You've got a guy who has said some outlandish, ridiculous things in the past. He has 5 women now who have come forward to accuse him of sexual impropriety. Several of the women, teenagers at the time. If Democrats can't win this seat, is there a case to be made for just shutting down the Democratic Party in the state of Alabama?
Well, I think 2 things. One, you have to realize that some of these votes have already been cast. So if you had a write-in ballot, they've already cast their votes for this. I also think, obviously, this was a seat that has been widely held by Republicans for a long time. And a lot of the reporting down on the ground shows that there are people that would vote for anybody over a Democrat right now in that state. You know, so I don't think you can have a kind of existential crisis question of Democrats in Alabama. Clearly, there's a groundswell. Doug, the candidate, the Democratic candidate, Doug Jones, was Skyping into a fundraiser last night, and he said that he feels like the ground is shifting, that there may be some momentum. So I think this is going to probably come down to the line here, and it's going to depend on, does Mr. Sessions end up going as a write-in candidate? Do they just duke it out, Roy Moore versus Doug Jones or not? So I think we're still trying to see where this race shapes up.
All right. Jason, a big thanks to you, Anna. It's called Playbook, by the way, and if you're one of the 17 people who aren't on the mailing list, I encourage you to get it. It's part of the Bible here at MSNBC. Thank you. Senate Republicans